1990s, Michael Jackson tried to buy Marvel Comics just so that he could play Spider-Man in his own produced movie. Pop star Michael Jackson was a huge comic book fan who collected tons of books, costumes and paraphernalia, and in the 1990s he met with Stan Lee and others for the express purpose of buying Marvel. The deal never made it beyond the meeting stage, but it has been widely speculated that the reason Jackson wanted Marvel was to own the rights to the Spider-Man character so that he could play him in a feature film. Marvel and DC Comics might be rivals, but they are hardly enemies. The two companies have worked together several times, most notably with the 1990s imprint Amalgam, which included both companies' characters melded together. For example, Marvel's Wolverine, human named Logan, and DC's Batman, Bruce Wayne, were combined to form the Amalgam character Dark Claw, Logan Wayne. Each company produced an equal number of issues. To facilitate the Amalgam characters, elaborate backstories and fictional reboots were created. Stan Lee and artist Don Heck created Iron Man at the height of the Cold War in 1963, when the American people were very much aware of war and its impact on their lives. On paper, Tony Stark offered no alternative to this. In fact, he really wasn't the most likable superhero at all. He was an arms dealer, a bit of a womanizer and more arrogant than possibly any other comic book creation. But this was the point. Lee was challenged by his publisher Martin Goodman to create a superhero who was also a wealthy capitalist war profiteer. Lee took on the challenge, believing all the while that Stark would be a big hit, and he was dead right. Perhaps one of the reasons for Iron Man's success was the fact that he was loosely based on the celebrity Howard Hughes, who embodied many of the superhero's traits in real life. And when the artist Heck first sketched the hero, he imagined the popular actor Errol Flynn. As improbable as it sounds, Marvel attempted to trademark the word zombie in comic book titles after publishing Tale of the Zombie in 1973. By the time the trademark was approved 2 years later, the series was coming to an end. Marvel lost the trademark in 1996, but it wasn't long before it was once again trademarking the armies of the undead, registering the words Marvel Zombies to protect its comic series of the same name. With DC, Marvel also trademarked the phrase superhero. What's the first thing you think about when you imagine the Hulk? The fact he's bright green, right? Well, this very nearly wasn't the case. Stan Lee always intended for the Hulk to be gray, and so he was. In the very first issue of the series The Incredible Hulk in 1962, this didn't last for long, however. Due to the fact that there were major problems with the inconsistency of the printing, they ended up having to choose a color instead. One of the most consistent colors in print at the time was green, so they opted for that. Wolverine was created by writer Len Wein, because he needed a character who could do battle with the Incredible Hulk. The Wolverine made his debut in issue 181, way back in 1974, as a Canadian special agent ordered by a government department to capture Hulk and bring him in. The early Wolverine displayed many of the traits: the claws, the yellow and blue costume, and the mask with the pointed ears, which would remain when he became a fan favorite as a member of the X-Men. But things could have been very, very different. The character of Wolverine was conceived when Wein decided that he wanted to create a character who would be popular in Canada. He knew that heroes based on animals were a big hit in the US, so he brainstormed Canadian animals, eventually narrowing it down to two: the Wolverine and the Badger. Thankfully, Wein's editor stepped in and suggested that the connotation of a wolf would make for a better superhero, and so the entire Marvel universe dodged a bullet of considerable size. This summer, in a cinema near you, the Badger just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? The first Marvel comic, cover date October 1939, featured the Human Torch, an android, so not a human, who shared the same name but little else with the much later Johnny Storm. Angel, a private detective who worked in costume. Namor the Submariner, a half-human, half-Atlantean who had superhero strength, but an anti-hero sensibility. A cowboy hero called the Masked Raider, an unnervingly Tarzan-like character called Khazar the Great, some gag cartoons and a story about auto racing. Of them, only Namor still survives. The issue was a huge success. All 80,000 printed sold immediately. Goodman then reprinted the issue identically except with a November 1939 cover date, and sold 800,000 of them. The She-Hulk character was created after Marvel learned of a plan to introduce a female Hulk in the popular Incredible Hulk TV series, they rushed the first issue of the Savage She-Hulk into production so they could hold the copyright and trademark. Venom was originally a lady. When the symbiote, an evil alien suit which takes over its host, was discarded by Spider-Man, writer David Michelinie didn't know what to do with it. Eventually, he decided to give the suit to a woman, but Michelinie decided that she needed to hate Spider-Man so much that she wanted to kill him, so he plotted out a story which, in true comic fashion, is massively convoluted. Brace yourself. This plotted version went as follows. A heavily pregnant woman is traveling in a taxi cab. Spider-Man distracts the driver, and the cab crashes into her husband. The husband dies in front of wife's eyes, and she loses her baby due to the shock. She ends up institutionalized with mental illness, and promises herself that she'll avenge the deaths of her husband and her baby. When Michelinie moved over to Amazing Spider-Man, he pitched that very idea to his boss, who said that the readers would never see a woman as a realistic physical threat to Spider-Man. Eventually, Michelinie came up with the character of Eddie Brock instead, the name eventually becoming synonymous with Venom. Throg is a frog that has the power of Thor and is in a superhero group called the Pet Avengers. Throg was originally a football player cursed by a mystic when he couldn't pay for her services. He managed to fit in with a frog group in Central Park and befriended Thor, who was also turned into a frog thanks to Loki. A sliver of Mjolnir fell off and that turned him into a frog version of Thor.